It's late spring and I wanted to show you how my backyard orchard is doing. This turned out to be a long video, and apparently the editing program I am using can't handle an hour-long video, so I had to split it into two-part video series. I'll upload part 2 in a few days. So in this first part of the tour, I'll show you some of my fruit trees that are developing fruit. Earlier this season, I posted a video where I toured my backyard orchards towards the beginning of spring. In that video, I showed you some of my trees that weren't doing all that well. We had a much cooler than usual winter this season, and several of my trees got hit pretty hard. Now, as we get closer to the end of spring, several of those trees that did not do well during winter are starting to bounce back. I'll start with this Hass avocado, which, as you can see, has been struggling to recover. This one got hit really hard during the winter months and lost all its leaves. We had a much cooler winter this month, and we're in early June and we're still getting quite a bit of cloudy days. This time last year, the temps were much warmer and we're getting a lot more sunny days than we are this season. I'm sure the unfavorable weather has prolonged this tree's recovery, but it is starting to push out some new growth. As you can see here, there's quite a bit of new leaves that are starting to come out. There's a little bit of growth that's coming out, not a whole lot, but still it's, like I said, it's in the early stages of recovery. But just a few weeks ago, this tree didn't have a single leaf on it. It pushed out a whole bunch of panicles, but it didn't have a single leaf on it. I've had this tree for several years, and this is the first winter where it's lost all its leaves. And I believe it's struggling more now because of the pH was too high on this one. I previously posted a video, and I'll put the title on the screen so you can search my channel for that video. In that video, I talked about the pH level being a bit too high, and the majority of my backyard orchard has a pH that's about 7, which is what this tree also has, 7, which is a little too high. I'm trying to get it down to about 6 to 6.5. For the past several weeks, I've been working on trying to reach my target for the pH. I bought some liquid acidic fertilizer, which I'm using when I water, basically lowering the pH down to somewhere around 6. And I also added some granular soil acidifier right at the start of spring. So hopefully between both of those, I'll be able to get it down pretty quick. Still have a long ways to go on this one, but hopefully it'll recover quickly. There's a very small amount of avocados that are at the very early stages of development, but like I said, this tree has been struggling, so I'm not sure if this is going to set any fruit at all. I have my serious doubts. In the past, I've gotten some pretty good harvests, considering it's growing in a container. It is a fairly large container, but still, I managed to get about 25 one season. That's about the largest crop this tree has produced, but hopefully it'll do better in the seasons to come. And the vine you see creeping up on the avocado, that's one of my grapevines. I'll list the variety on the screen. A while back I had the side fence here replaced, and I never had a chance to put up the trellis I was using for these vines, so I just kind of let it go, never got around to it. And as you can see, they took over this whole area here, so I'm gonna have to wait till they go dormant and then work on the trellis. Here's what I was using for the trellis. It's basically a 4 by 8 foot panel of hog wire. These vines are doing really well considering they're growing in a container. This is first season that they've put on as much flower buds as you see here. I mean, it's completely covered with flower buds all throughout all the vines. This is the heaviest set that it's ever produced. In previous seasons, I've had fairly good amount of grapes come off of this particular variety, but like I said, this season it's the heaviest it's ever produced. The grapes off of this one and two others that I'm about to show you, they're very sweet, but they have a thick skin that's not really edible, and they do have seeds, so they're not considered really good table grapes. This is the other one that I have growing, and I'll list the variety on the screen for this one as well. This one is just barely starting to push out some flower buds. It doesn't produce near as many as the one I just showed you, but that's mainly because it's not getting as much sun due to my neighbor's tree that's blocking out all the sun in this area. And this other one over here gets even less sun, and this is the one that produces the least amount. It's put on good growth, but this corner here doesn't get too much sun. I'm hoping one day to re-landscape my front yard, and that's why I have these growing in containers. I eventually plan to transplant them over towards my front yard. And next is my Pakistan mulberry, which is just barely starting to push out some new fruit. Last season, by this time I was already harvesting berries off of this, but the cooler temps in my area have really affected the fruiting cycle on this one. Berries off of this one are good size and they have a excellent flavor. And this other one here is my Starfruit tree that I have growing in this container. This one also got hit pretty hard with the cold temps, and it's just now starting to push out some new growth. This one was in bloom this past September, but it didn't set a single fruit. And next in these 20-gallon grow bags are my Jujube trees. These do quite well growing in containers. This will be their third year in these containers, and last season I got a pretty good harvest, and as you can see here, there are quite a bit of flowers. A good portion of them are in bloom, but it's got quite a bit of flower buds scattered throughout the tree, and it should be a another pretty good harvest. And right next to it over here, I have another one, which is also has also produced quite a bit of flower buds. Here's the variety on this one. This is a Lee, and it's also going on its third year growing in a container. This one doesn't produce quite as much as the one I just showed you, which was the long variety. But they are sweet in flavor, not as sweet as the long in my opinion, but they are very tasty. And unlike the long, this one is self-pollinating. The long requires a pollinator, and the Lee is listed as a good match for that. And this is my Australian Fingerline. This one has been growing in a 10-gallon grow bag for about 10 years, and it does very well. As you can see here, there's some fruit that is starting to develop. There's quite a bit scattered throughout the tree, and it has a few flower buds, some that are in bloom and some that are just developing. And over on this other side over here, there's quite a bit more finger lines that have already set. And these here are my Emperor Lychee trees. These are very slow growing trees. I've had these in the ground for about 3 years now, and they've put on very little growth. Last season I didn't get very many off of this one. Didn't produce a whole lot, and both of these got hit pretty hard during the winter months and lost several leaves. But as you can see, they put on quite a few blooms. This tree here, I harvested about 25 off of this one. Hopefully now that it's starting to warm up, they'll develop a whole flush of new growth and hopefully get them to put a little bit more size this season. And this one here is my Longan, Kohala Longan. Last season I harvested about 20 off of this one. It's a very tasty fruit. I was very happy with the flavor. This is another one of my trees that got hit pretty hard during the winter months and has been struggling to recover. But it hasn't put on too many flower buds. This is about the only panicle that's producing any flower buds. This other panicle here has a little bit of growth, but I don't think there's going to be any fruit coming off of that one. Last season I had several panicles that produced fruit, but don't think it's going to do that well this season unless it starts to put on a little bit more growth. And this is my burgundy plum tree that has put on a substantial amount of new growth, but it's not a heavy producer by any means. I started to prune this one on the left side here, and I accidentally wound up cutting some of the fruit. I had gone through the tree and I didn't see any on there, so I thought it'd be okay to give it a prune for shape and height, but I wound up cutting some fruit. There's still about 5 left on there, but this does not produce a heavy crop at all. I have a friend that has a Santa Rosa plum, and I'm gonna see if I can get some scions off of his and see if I can graft them onto this tree. It'll be my first attempt at grafting. I'll go ahead and take videos of when I do that. The best time to cut the branches off is supposedly when they're dormant, just before spring starts. So that'll be one of my projects for next season. I'll be sure to video the progress and keep you posted. And next to my plum is my Suriname cherry tree. This is the Lolita, the black variety. And it also lost quite a bit of its leaves during the winter months, but it's recovering. It should bounce back. And here is my Jujube that's doing well. It's a bit hard to see from this angle. Here, this angle here should be a little better. As you can see, it's put on quite a bit of new growth, and it's handling the cooler months a little better than some of my other trees. I've had this tree for several years now, but it's only been in the ground for just over 2 years. This tree is quite unique. It has the fruit that develops off the trunk or some of the thicker branches. Last season I had one flower that set some fruit. Hopefully in another season or two it can get this one to set a decent sized crop. And this is one of my trees that didn't survive this past winter. This is my Barbados cherry tree, which was planted here a couple of years ago. It did well the previous season, but didn't survive this winter. And this is my gold nugget loquat, which produced its very first harvest this past season. And I recently posted a flower to harvest on this one. I'll list the title of that video on the screen so you can search my channel. In that video I talk about the taste, and you can also see what the fruit looks like. And this is my papaya that I have growing in a 15-gallon container. Not sure what variety this one is. It was gifted to me about 6 years ago. This is the second time that it's set fruit. There were 2 that were growing on here, but one of them didn't reach full maturity. This plant did fairly well during the winter months. It got a little bit of a leaf damage, but otherwise it did all right. And this fruit here is pretty good size, and it's just about ready to be harvested. And next to the papaya I have a volunteer fig, which I'm not really sure what variety this is. I tried comparing the leaves to some of the other figs that I have growing, but it don't really seem to match up. I guess I'll have to wait till this one starts producing figs so I can get an idea what variety it is. And this is my Suriname cherry tree. It's supposed to be the black variety, but it's produced a small amount of fruit in the past, and they're red, not black. It was planted here in the ground about 2.5 years ago, and it's put on quite a bit of growth since then. It seems to like it here in this corner. It gets mostly just morning sun, but it's put on quite a bit of growth and it's doing well. Hopefully I'll be able to get it to produce a good harvest this season. And here are my fig trees, which have put on a really good amount of growth this season. They're pushed out some really big leaves, and they're just now starting to develop fruit. This one here, the Peter's honey, it always puts on a really good crop. It's put on quite a bit of growth, and I'm gonna have to cut this one back. As soon as it goes dormant, I'll prune it back because I have two other varieties that are going pretty close to it, and this one's shading them all out, so it's going to have to be cut back quite a bit, allow the others to catch up. And like I just mentioned, the leaves, this season, the leaves on all three of these seem to be a lot bigger than they've ever been on previous seasons. So hopefully it'll put on some pretty good sized figs. And this other one over here on the other side is my Excel fig. It usually starts to develop its figs a few weeks after the Peter's honey has started. Here you can see they're just starting to develop. They're at the very early stages of development. And over on the other side, over here is my blackjack fig, which is also at the very early stages of developing fruit. This one's running even a little bit further behind the Excel fig. All three of these were about the same size when they were planted, which was just over 3 years ago. But like I said, the Peter's honey in the front is the one that's put on the most growth, and you can tell by looking at the size of the trunk compared to the others. Here you can see it's pretty good size, whereas the other ones, this one here is not as big. But it is a little bit bigger than the one in the back there, the blackjack fig. But the Peter's honey is the one that's going to need to be trimmed back quite a bit to keep the others from getting shaded out. And these are the cuttings that I've taken off of all three of these trees. They've been growing in these 1-gallon grow bags for about 2 years, and you can see they're putting on some good sized figs on there. Just about all of them are starting to develop figs. And I have a few more over here. These are also putting on a fair amount of figs. And there's one more that's tucked away in here that I'm gonna have to move out of this heavily shaded area. It's a bit hard to see. There's the container there, but it's doing well, putting on a small amount of figs. And this is my little Miss Figgy fig tree that has put on quite a bit of growth since last season. It's getting shaded out by the apricot trees, which have also put on quite a bit of growth. I'm going to have to cut them back a bit. They're getting a little bit too big, as is the cherry tree that's off to the right. this one here. Well, there's actually 2 cherry trees here. And they are also going to need pruning for size and shape control. Of all the figs I have, this is the last one that starts to develop fruit. It's a small and compact tree, but it manages to set a good amount of figs on it. And now back to my cherry trees. I have a mini royal on the left and a royal Lee right next to it on the right. And they produced a good amount of cherries this season. Not quite as many as the previous year. Last year I got quite a bit of cherries off of these trees. This year I put on a good sized crop, but like I said, not nearly as many as last season. And I've been picking a few at a time. They're good size and very tasty fruit. And here's another one of my figs, which is container grown, and it's also developing some figs. This is a black mission fig. I've had this tree for 6 years now, and this is the first year that this one has produced as many as it has on here developing now. I mean, it's not a big crop compared to the other fig trees, but this is the most that I've ever been able to get off of this tree. And this is my Celeste fig. Of all my container grown figs, this is the one that always does the best. It's not a very tall tree, but it has good shape, good branching. And about a couple of years ago, I went and I tipped the tree. I cut off all the little, off of each branch I cut small, about 1 inch off of each branch. I tipped it, and as you can see, this season it seems to have quite a few more figs that are growing off of each end of where I tipped it. Previous seasons I wasn't getting this many on the tips. This is the first season that it's started to push out this many. And here is my Grumichama, which is starting to develop some fruit. Back in about mid-April, it pushed out a really heavy set of flowers, and it looks like quite a few of them took. So it should be a pretty good harvest. And this tree usually blooms twice. If it follows last year's blooming cycle, it'll likely put out a second set of blooms sometime around late September or early October. And usually the second set of blooms is the heavier set of fruit. So hopefully the second bloom will be even bigger than this first bloom here, and I'll get quite a bit of berries off this tree. Well, that'll be it for this video. I hope you enjoyed watching. If so, please don't forget to hit that like button, and if you'd like to follow along, please consider subscribing to my channel. Until next time, as always, stay safe, grow your own, and thank you for watching.